What's going on, everyone? So, Stu Macher. A lot of people want to see Stu Macher return for the upcoming Scream 7. I have said myself that if they were ever going to do it, this is probably the time in which they do it. I am not somebody that is a fan of it. I personally do not want to see them bring Stu Macher back. Nothing against Stu. Love Stu Macher. Love Matthew Lillard as an actor. I just think it's too hard to explain over the last 30 years. Where's he been? Why now? Why is it taking so, there's just so much you'd have to pack into this film. Right? And I see a lot of people be like, well, he could have survived. It's not about whether he could have survived. Yeah, sure. Could he have survived the events of 96? Sure. Right? But people forget two things. Right? One, Stu died before the superhuman rules were established. Right? People forget Randy's rules. And Randy's rules, unlike Mindy, which is why I don't know why they keep having Mindy ranting dialogues that go nowhere and are completely pointless. Randy's actually informed the viewer and the audience member how Ghostface was going to be, right? For example, right, you see, like in Scream 2, Randy lays out the rules. Body count is always bigger. Death scenes are always much more elaborate, right? And never, ever assume the killer is dead. All of that happens in Scream 2 and even in Scream 3 to an extent, right? But in Scream 3, Randy establishes new rules, right? And that is that basically everyone becomes superhero. Like the Ghostface, you have to, what does he say? You have to basically cryogenically freeze his head in order to take out Ghostface, right? And from that moment on, every Ghostface from Roman on have all been essentially superhuman, right? Scream 4 followed those rules. Scream 3 followed those rules. But more so with Jill, Charlie died pretty easily. But, like with Jill, right? Jill essentially was superhuman, right? You had Amber and Richie essentially superhuman, right? Like they followed the rules. So Stu was pre those rules, right? So things like that, I think, are important to remember and establish, right? The other thing that people just overlook is, like, again, the complaint isn't that Stu is alive. It's just, where has he been, right? And then now you have to explain that he's Ghostface. And it's like, why has it taken you 30 years to come back as Ghostface? However, an easier route to have Stu back, and you don't need as much explanation, and you still need a lot, but you don't need it'd be a lot simpler, is if Stu Macher wasn't actually Ghostface. Now, I've talked about this in the past, but I think now is a better time to bring this up because we actually have more information. We know Stu is actually going to be in this film. I talked about this like years ago before we even knew he was ever coming back, right? But to me, the easiest way to set up and establish Stu Macher is outside of, I've broken it down like how you could make it work if you wanted it to. I don't think you can have Stu in Scream 7. I think you would have to have Stu in Scream 8, but you lay the framework and explain everything you need to explain in Scream 7 to then ultimately have Stu in Scream 8 in a bigger capacity, right? The other way to do that is Stu is just a good guy. He's not actually Ghostface, right? So you could have something where, like, hey, how did Stu survive? Well, he was, in a psych ward, right? And, he's been locked away and blah, blah, blah. And he got out on good behavior, right? And then have Stu Macher killings start to pick back up after he gets out, right? Maybe he's one of the patients that I've seen people throw out. What if he's one of the patients? The only reason I don't think that works is because it's Fallbrook, right? Like, not Woodsboro, in which the patients escape. But that could be like, what if Stu is in a psych ward in Woodsboro, right? And, that Ghostface ends up releasing patients in Fallbrook to kind of make it look like Stu got out on that, so now he released his buddy that was in Fallbrook or whatever, that was obsessed with Sydney or whatever, right? Like, you could do something like that, but I think you keep it simple, right? I think you have the Stu explanation. Stu survived. He was in a psych ward, right? He got out after 30 years, right? Like, that's why he hasn't killed. That's why he hasn't done anything. That's where he's been the last 30 years. And then now he comes out. And yes, you could have him come out, and after 30 years, now he finally goes back to being Ghostface again in order to kill. I just think that that's silly, right? It's like, why? So you were locked up for 30 years, and then we're plotting and planning to get your revenge on Sydney when, like, the only reason you did what you did was pure pressure. Like, he wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't he was the fall guy. He was the patsy. Maybe he wants to prove himself, right? Maybe it's something like, I know what you did last summer, or you're like, I want to be remembered. Like, everyone talks about Billy. No one talks about me. And I was involved too. But it's like, again, you weren't the mastermind. You weren't in that. And it took you 30 years for you to finally come out and do that. I would rather see them do something. And I just think it creates such a much more interesting dynamic, right? Imagine if Stu gets out, Sydney is informed, hey, just to let you know, Stu Macher is released, right? We get all that information. You have some weird dialogue or whatever that, like, hey, Stu survived those nights and, was locked away in a mental institution, whatever, right? Cool, perfect. Stu gets out, right? Now, you could have Stu's house get burned down, all of that stuff. And, Stu's trying to figure out where to go, realizes, hey, Ghostface is coming. He goes to try to help Sydney, right? Because maybe he has some tie-in or whatever. I mean, his house is being burnt down, right? Like, they want to burn down the past. Maybe Ghostface goes after Stu, right? So now you could have Stu go from Ghostface to victim and target, and, have kind of that whole dynamic. Now Stu goes to help Sydney Prescott. But here's the thing. Sydney's never going to trust Stu Macher. Sydney's never going to want Stu around, nothing. And imagine that dynamic. Imagine seeing Sydney and Stu have to, and having that relationship where Stu's trying to show, like, hey, I'm not that person. Like, I want to help. Like, Ghostface is after you. Like, I'm here to help you type thing, right? Like, kind of like a Cotton thing, right? Like, and Sydney's like, absolutely not. You killed all my friends. You killed everybody. And also imagine how Stu would feel knowing his daughter Sydney's daughter Tatum is named after his sister. And that dynamic and all that stuff, right? Like, literally named after my sister. And, you could have that emotional moment. And imagine how awesome a full circle moment would be where Stu goes and saves Tatum. He had his sister killed and ends up saving, Sydney's daughter, Tatum. Sydney's still never going to trust him. Sydney's still never going to accept him. Sydney's still never going to do that. But now Sydney at least is in this, like, tough spot, this tough dilemma. You have this kind of full circle moment with their relationship, with their past. You can have Stu in more movies if you want, especially if he survives. You could actually have him, you could actually do what you should have done with Cotton, right? Like, and have him kind of play that role where he's reformed and he's actually the good guy. And, he's a target of Ghostface. How cool would that be, right? Like, you could have all those elements, all those things. I just think it's a better approach. I think it's easier to explain because you don't have to explain all the, like, where, like, you don't have to have more details on, like, where has he been, right? You don't have to have, like, why are you doing this? What's the plan? What's all, like, again, it's straightforward. This is, Stu survived. This is where he's been. Now he's out, right? And now here he is, and you can develop his character and story throughout the course of the film rather than, like, you can't just, like, have Stu, like, pop up and him be Ghostface. Like, you want that to be a surprise. You want that to be a thing. Well, you just establish right from the jump, like, hey, Stu's alive. Here he is. I just think that that's a better approach. And then now you can actually integrate him into the film in a proper manner. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out. It's me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.